Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Before the formation of the United States, before the ink dried on the Constitution, and long before the Founding Fathers gathered in Philadelphia, a powerful and sophisticated alliance of native nations thrived in the woodlands of what is now the northeastern United States. This alliance was known as the Iroquois Confederacy, or the Haudenosaunee, meaning people of the Longhouse. In a world governed by tribal customs and oral traditions, the Haudenosaunee established a unique form of democratic governance that brought together 5 and later 6 distinct nations: the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora. United not by conquest but by a shared commitment to peace and mutual cooperation, this confederacy created a lasting framework for collective decision-making and intertribal diplomacy. With visual echoes of symbolic wampum belts, longhouses stretching deep into the forests, and the lands that shaped their identity, the story of the Haudenosaunee reveals much more than an indigenous past. It uncovers a foundational influence on the future of American democracy. This video explores how their political system inspired early American thinkers, how women held remarkable authority within their societies, how the Great Law of Peace offered a blueprint for unity, and how their legacy still resonates today. Through this journey, we challenge the myth that democracy in North America began with the Constitution, and instead uncover a deeper, older root in Native governance that shaped the very idea of unity through diversity. The Iroquois, known to themselves as the Haudenosaunee or People of the Longhouse, were a union of 6 indigenous nations who inhabited the northeastern woodlands of North America. Originally consisting of the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca, the Confederacy later welcomed the Tuscarora in the early 18th century, forming what became known as the 6 Nations. Each nation maintained its own identity, language, and territory, yet they shared a common culture rooted in harmony with the land and with one another. The formation of their confederacy was not born of conquest, but of a visionary movement for peace. Central to this unification is the legendary story of the Great Peacemaker, a prophet-like figure who, along with his ally Hiawatha, traveled from nation to nation advocating for an end to cycles of revenge and warfare. According to oral tradition, the peacemaker's message of peace, unity, and consensus governance deeply moved the warring tribes. Hiawatha, a man grieving personal loss, became the voice of this vision, using his own story to help spread the call for unity. Their efforts culminated in the establishment of the Great Law of Peace, a sophisticated constitution that outlined the principles of collective leadership, consensus decision-making, and the roles and responsibilities of clan and nation leaders. The Great Law was never written in books, but rather preserved through powerful oral tradition and symbolized in wampum belts, sacred beaded artifacts that recorded treaties, laws, and historical events. These belts, passed down through generations, served as both spiritual and political tools, maintaining the integrity and memory of the Confederacy. This oral and symbolic system of law made it possible for the Iroquois to govern effectively across vast territories without written records. Their story is not only one of cultural resilience and unity, but also one of deep political insight and innovation. The Iroquois Confederacy was one of the most advanced and balanced political systems in pre-colonial North America, guided by a governance model that blended deep spiritual values with practical mechanisms for peace and cooperation. At its core was the clan system, which formed the foundation of social and political life. Each nation within the Confederacy was divided into clans such as bear, wolf, or turtle, and these clans extended across national boundaries, creating bonds of kinship and mutual responsibility between the nations. The central governing body was the Grand Council, composed of 50 sachems, or chiefs, who represented the different clans and nations. These leaders were not autocrats, but rather stewards of the Great Law of Peace. Importantly, sachems were chosen not through birthright or personal ambition, but by the clan mothers, elder women of great wisdom and influence within the matrilineal society. In the Haudenosaunee world, lineage and property passed through the mother's line, and women held the authority to appoint and, if necessary, remove leaders who failed to uphold their duties to the people. This matrilineal and matrifocal structure ensured a balance of power that included female voices in political life, something rare in most global societies of the time. The Grand Council operated through consensus, not majority rule. Decisions could not be made unless all parties reached agreement, a process that required patience, negotiation, and a commitment to unity. This method prevented domination by any single group and ensured that all voices were heard, even the smallest nation or dissenting clan. It was, in many ways, an early and highly functional form of representative democracy. Each leader was accountable to the people and guided by the values of peace, equity, and mutual respect. Far from being primitive or informal, the Iroquois political system was a structured and sophisticated model that prioritized collective harmony over individual power, an ideal that would eventually draw the admiration of Enlightenment thinkers and American revolutionaries alike. As the American colonies moved toward revolution and independence, some of the founding fathers looked not only to Europe's Enlightenment philosophies for inspiration, but also to the political systems already flourishing on the continent. Among the most influential of these was the Iroquois Confederacy. Benjamin Franklin, in particular, developed a deep interest in the Haudenosaunee way of governance. During his tenure as a colonial diplomat, Franklin frequently interacted with Iroquois leaders and came to admire their ability to maintain unity among diverse nations. He even published accounts of their political structure and advocated for the colonies to adopt a similar model of federal cooperation. One of the most pivotal moments came during the Albany Congress of 1744, where colonial leaders met with representatives of the Iroquois to discuss alliances and strategies for mutual defense. It was here that the Onondaga leader Canasatego delivered a now famous speech, urging the colonies to unite just as the Six Nations had done. He advised them to form a league, noting that strength lay in unity. This address left a lasting impression on colonial thinkers, including Franklin, who later used the Iroquois example in promoting the Albany Plan of Union, an early but unsuccessful attempt to form a united colonial government. The structure of the Iroquois Confederacy offered a clear example of federalism. Individual nations retained their own autonomy while working together through a central council for mutual benefit. This mirrored the later arrangement of states under the U.S. Constitution. The Great Law of Peace emphasized unity, collective decision-making, checks on power, and even impeachment, principles that would find parallels in the American founding documents. However, the extent of Iroquois influence on the Constitution remains debated among scholars. Some argue that the Founding Fathers were heavily inspired by indigenous governance, pointing to documented interactions and shared political concepts. Others suggest the influence was more symbolic or limited, and that European traditions played the dominant role. Still, the presence of Native American political ideas in early American discourse is undeniable. The Iroquois Confederacy offered a living, functional example of unity through diversity, an idea at the heart of both indigenous diplomacy and the American experiment. During the colonial and revolutionary eras, the Iroquois Confederacy played a critical role in shaping the balance of power in North America through skillful diplomacy and strategic alliances. Surrounded by expanding European empires, the Haudenosaunee maintained their autonomy for over 2 centuries by leveraging their central geographic position and political cohesion. They engaged in calculated diplomacy with the French, British, and Dutch, often playing one power against another to secure trade advantages and territorial integrity. This diplomatic balancing act was a testament to their political savvy and deep understanding of international dynamics. The French and Indian War, 1754-1763, known globally as part of the 7 Years' War, tested the Confederacy's unity and influence. While some nations leaned toward the British and others toward the French, the Iroquois officially tried to maintain neutrality for much of the conflict. Eventually, most of the Confederacy, particularly the Mohawk under the leadership of Joseph Brant, aligned with the British due to long-standing trade relationships and promises of land protection. The war ended in a British victory, but the displacement and destruction it brought to indigenous lands foreshadowed the turmoil to come. When the American Revolution erupted, the Confederacy faced an even deeper crisis. The unity that had sustained the Haudenosaunee for centuries began to fracture. Some nations, like the Mohawk and Seneca, supported the British, hoping to stop further American encroachment on their lands. Others, like the Oneida and Tuscarora, sided with the American colonists, influenced by missionary ties and promises of shared sovereignty. This internal division marked one of the most painful chapters in Iroquois history, as members of the same confederacy fought on opposing sides of the war. The aftermath of the revolution was devastating for the Iroquois. Despite their efforts and sacrifices, both sides largely abandoned their indigenous allies. The Treaty of Paris in 1783, which ended the war, was negotiated without native representation, and vast tracts of Iroquois land were ceded to the new United States. The war had shattered the Confederacy's unity and diminished its power, leaving its people to face an uncertain future amid rapid American expansion. Yet even in defeat, the Iroquois maintained their cultural identity and continued to resist the erasure of their political legacy. In modern times, the legacy of the Iroquois Confederacy endures not only through history, but through ongoing political, cultural, and diplomatic contributions that reaffirm their identity and influence. Indigenous governance is increasingly being recognized as a legitimate and sovereign structure within broader national and international frameworks. Today, Haudenosaunee nations continue to operate under their own traditional political systems, maintaining councils, treaties, and diplomatic relations that reflect the enduring principles of the Great Law of Peace. Their assertion of sovereignty, refusing to be fully subsumed by colonial borders, stands as a powerful symbol of indigenous resilience. Cultural revival is another cornerstone of their modern legacy. Efforts to preserve and revitalize traditional languages, including Mohawk, Oneida, and Onondaga, are underway across Haudenosaunee communities. Language schools, immersion programs, and intergenerational teaching have become vital tools in reclaiming identity and passing ancestral knowledge to new generations. Ceremonial practices, clan structures, and oral traditions continue to shape community life, affirming that the Iroquois are not just a part of the past. They are a living, evolving people. On the world stage, the Iroquois have also made their voice heard in international diplomacy. Leaders from the Confederacy have delivered speeches at the United Nations, advocating for indigenous rights, environmental stewardship, and the recognition of native sovereignty. Their involvement in these global forums reflects a continuation of the diplomatic wisdom that once shaped relations with European empires centuries ago. Perhaps one of the most visible modern symbols of their identity is found in the sport of lacrosse. Known as the Creator's Game, lacrosse originated with the Haudenosaunee and carries spiritual and cultural significance. The Iroquois Nationals lacrosse team, competing internationally under their own flag and passport, represents more than athletic excellence. It symbolizes political autonomy and cultural pride. Despite challenges, such as issues with international travel recognition, their presence on the global stage has become a point of unity and inspiration for indigenous peoples worldwide. The legacy of the Iroquois Confederacy is not confined to the past. It lives on in their governance, their languages, their diplomacy, and their cultural expressions. It reminds the world that democracy, unity, and resilience were rooted in indigenous America long before the founding of the United States. Despite the Iroquois Confederacy's profound political and cultural achievements, their story has often been overshadowed, distorted, or entirely erased in mainstream American history. One of the most damaging myths perpetuated over centuries is the notion of Native peoples as savage or primitive, a narrative used to justify colonization and dispossession. This stereotype stands in stark contrast to the reality of the Haudenosaunee, who developed a highly structured form of governance rooted in peace, diplomacy, and collective decision-making. Their Great Law of Peace offered a model of representative leadership and social balance that rivaled and in many ways predated the political philosophies emerging from Enlightenment Europe. Yet, despite this sophisticated legacy, the Iroquois are rarely given credit in the dominant narratives of American history. Their contributions to democratic ideals are often overlooked in textbooks, and their role in shaping the political landscape of early America is minimized or ignored. The exclusion of indigenous voices from historical accounts reflects a broader pattern of erasure that continues to affect Native communities today. This historical marginalization is not just academic, it has real-world consequences. Many Haudenosaunee nations continue to face legal and political battles over land rights and sovereignty. Treaties signed centuries ago are often violated or disregarded, and disputes over ancestral territories remain unresolved. The struggle for recognition, self-governance, and justice persists, reminding us that colonial legacies are not relics of the past but ongoing realities. Correcting these misconceptions requires more than just acknowledgement. It demands the recentering of Native voices in the telling of American history. The Iroquois Confederacy is not a footnote, but a foundational chapter, one that challenges us to rethink the origins of democracy, the meaning of unity, and the depth of indigenous wisdom that helped shape a nation. The story of the Iroquois Confederacy is one of enduring strength, visionary diplomacy, and democratic innovation. Long before the formation of the United States, the Haudenosaunee built a sophisticated society rooted in balance, consensus, and respect, principles that not only guided their own nations, but also inspired elements of American political thought. From the creation of the Great Law of Peace to their influence on early colonial leaders, their legacy stretches across centuries and borders. In today's world, where indigenous communities continue to fight for recognition, land rights, and sovereignty, the example of the Iroquois Confederacy remains deeply relevant. It reminds us that indigenous systems of governance are not relics of the past. They are powerful, living frameworks that have much to teach about justice, cooperation, and sustainable leadership. Now more than ever, it's important to seek out these stories, uplift Native voices, and honor the truths that have too often been hidden or ignored. Explore Haudenosaunee cultural centers, support Indigenous-led education, and take the time to listen and learn. If you found this chapter of history eye-opening, make sure to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more hidden chapters of history. There's so much more to uncover, and together we can give voice to the stories that deserve to be heard.